Oh, there we go. Fantastic. Welcome, welcome everybody. Greg Peterson coming to you from the Urban Farm on a bit of a hot day here in Phoenix. And this is in lieu of our mesquite bean milling. And I really want to apologize from our crew and, to everybody out there that, we couldn't do the milling this weekend. And it's turned into a good thing that we didn't plan the milling this weekend with everything that's going on out there. So I apologize up front, and we are picking a date toward the end of October that we'll be milling your beans for you. And what we're here to do today is talk about what to do with your beans. What do you do with your beans, and how do you store them? And the brain trust that's here today is amazing. First of all, I have Peggy. Hey, Peggy.
Hi.
Peggy is an amazing wild forager here in town, and she's been on multiple times with us, and she can answer a lot of our questions for us. And there's Don Titmus. Don, how long have you been harvesting mesquite?
Oh, since we first really got popular over here, probably 05 or 06, I really started getting into it.
Oh, very good. Yeah, and then Don and I brought the mesquite bean mill up from Tucson in probably 2007. We started doing that. And then we got this crazy idea a couple of years ago that we needed our own dang mill. And yeah, like that. So welcome, Don and Brad. Are you there?
Yes.
Oh, nice. Welcome, Brad. Brad Lancaster wrote the book. This is an amazing book called Rainwater Harvesting for Drylands and Beyond. This is the third version, and I was on Rosie on the House this morning, Brad, talking about rainwater harvesting and such, and I was thumbing through your version 3, and these photographs in here are just beautiful. Good job.
Thank you.
You've done an extraordinary job with that. And Brad runs harvestingrainwater.com. In fact, look what I have on today, Brad.
Very nice.
Yeah. And he is also one of the people involved with Desert Harvesters down in Tucson. How long have you been harvesting mesquite beans, Brad?
Oof. Well, let's see. Probably since at least 2003.
Nice.
But I think that's when we started Desert Harvesters. But started harvesting and experimenting before then. Yeah. Thanks to the folks in Cascabel that were some of the pioneers.
Oh, yes, they were, weren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. So today, a big part of what we're going to talk about today is how do we preserve our beans, because we can't mill them now, and we have a deadline, and the deadline looks like once the rains come, once our monsoons come, it just gets to be impossible to mill them. So we have to do it now or after the monsoons are gone in October. So given that we're going to be doing this in October, what do we need to do to preserve our beans until then? And Don, you want to jump in first?
Yes. So dry, critical. Cool, if you can keep them cool. Sometimes you have to store them in your house or in a cool space in the garage or somewhere like that where it's not going to get too hot or direct sun on it. And did I say keep it dry? I think I said keep it dry because that's the critical.
Hold on. Keep it dry, right?
Keep it dry.
Yeah, there we go.
2 thumbs up. Yeah,
so
that's the critical thing. And you got to keep other bugs and other things out of it. So it has to be pest contained, pest-free contained. Those are the main points.
Cool. And what do we do? I want to pitch this question to you, Brad. What do we do about the Broken Beetles? And maybe you can tell people what the Broken Beetles are and how do we manage them if we got a bucket of mesquite beans that we want to store for the next 5 months until the milling?
Yeah, so the Broken Beetles will they'll lay eggs in the pods, and that's when you see the little holes in the pods. They've drilled in actually, I'm going to check myself on that. The holes are where I can't remember now if that's where they drill in. I actually don't think that's the case. I think that's when they start to
come
emerge.
out.
Yeah. So, but the Broken Beetle, its larvae eat the pods, and it's not any problem for us in terms of health if you eat the larvae. It's because they've just been eating mesquite pod. It's more an aesthetic thing.
Yeah.
And it can also affect maybe how well you can store the food, because if it's full of holes and whatnot, there may be more surface area and more of a chance of it going bad sooner. So what Don was saying is right on. The other thing is when you pick, you can do a couple things. So a traditional strategy is to lay out the pods, say on a cloth or whatnot on the ground where it's really hot. You do the same thing on the hood of a car in the daytime hours, and that's to really get the temperature up to inhibit the beetles and their larvae. And then you bring it in at night. You got to bring it in at night, because if you don't,
The moisture.
yeah, there's more moisture and whatnot. You don't want that because that can lead to aflatoxins. So that's one strategy. You can get it real hot and dry, and then you can seal up the container and store it.
I'm wondering, because I've done that before and the beetles still show up. I'm wondering if sticking them in the freezer kills them.
Well, that was the next thing I was going to say, and I've had more success with that. And so you can store your pods in a Ziploc bag or whatnot in the freezer. To be extra safe, you can have them in the freezer for a couple days. Take it out, don't open the bag, freeze them again for another couple days, take them out for a day, and then freeze a third time. You don't have to go that extreme usually. I've only tried that once. I've actually been fine otherwise, just sealing in the freezer in a Ziploc bag, freezing them good, and then taking them out when it's time to mill. But here's a key thing about milling is when you take those frozen pods out of the freezer, you don't want to open the bag until everything is thoroughly thawed out, because you're going to have cold pods in a hot climate, and the moisture is going to, the atmospheric moisture, no matter how little it is going to condense on those pods, cold pods. So that's why you want to keep your bag sealed when you thaw it out, and then once everything's totally thawed and what's in the bag is the same temperature as the outside, then you can open the bag and you're not going to have that moisture condensing on your pods. And then you're ready to go. So you got to give yourself enough time before you're going to mill at home, or you're going to take your pods to a public milling for that thawing process to occur. Because you don't want to take moist pods to a milling. They'll gunk up the mill.
Yeah. Last year we actually had some friends of mine who brought like a half a bucket of beans, and they weren't quite dry enough. And I said, we did it toward the end of the day, I think, didn't we, Don? And I said, let's go ahead and try that and see what happens. And it definitely slows things down significantly.
Yeah, and that just reminded me of one other thing. We've had some folks bring really great, totally dry pods to public millings. When you try and bend them, they immediately snap in two. So they pass the snap test and dry, but they still bog down the mill. And we found that's for two reasons. One reason is they just are really sweet pods. They have a much higher sugar content. And so we just have to run the pods through for that batch slower than your average pods. The second reason
By the
why,
way, that's a really good thing to have really sweet pods.
yeah, no problem there. Then the second thing is sometimes you've got the larva in the pod. You don't necessarily see it, they haven't emerged yet. And the moisture content of the larvae clog the
Right.
milk.
Oh,
Even though the
interesting.
pods are still snapping in two, no problem.
Oh, okay.
So again, you can
I
still run them.
might let them get out.
Well, you can still run it through the mill. There's no health issues or anything like that. It's just that you got to run everything through a lot slower now.
So what I'd like to do is have each of us share how we process our beans to get them ready for milling. Just so that people can see a few different ways on how to do it. You want to start, Don?
Sure. I got to go back to my screen again. So what I do is, I'm primarily harvesting either off the tree or with tops on the ground and knock them out of the tree and gather them all up. I put them into old chicken food bags because it's already a food grade bag. So I just load up my chicken food bags, the old ones, and then, I'll bring them home and bag by bag, I'll lay them out on a steel like rack out next to my driveway, which is facing south. And then I'll spread out the beans so that they're maybe like about 2 inches thick a layer, so I get the heat all the way through. And it's elevated so that the air can go all the way around the pods. And it's on a white cotton bed sheet. So all I got to do then is pick up the corners of my bed sheet and then haul them into the house. And then in the house, then I'll start to salt, make sure that there's no rocks, no sticks, no tendrils, nothing that be detrimental to my food once it's processed.
Well, and our mill.
And the mill.
If you bring a batch of beans for us and there's a rock or a screw or something in there, it can kill our mill, do major damage to a $14,000 machine.
Right.
So that's a real important, critical. Yes, thank you, Don.
Critical, absolutely. And so I'll usually have 2 tubs. I can show you a picture in a minute. So I have, sticks and stones and bad pods and beans on one side and the good stuff on the other. And then I'll sort it all out. I'll reload it back into those chicken bags. And then those chicken food bags, will go into a 55-gallon drum. And then I'll store the pods beans in there. So that's my system. I'm not bothered by beetles coming out.
Protein, baby.
So it's all part of the process. So it increases the protein content to balance out the carbohydrate. So I'm okay with that.
A couple of years
ago, kinds of animals anyway, so it's just part of the ecosystem.
A couple of years ago, I had some people that I knew that went to a bug protein conference, and they were there for a week talking about eating bugs. And it's like, for me, it's like, not quite there yet.
Yeah, chocolate coated roaches. No,
la 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 la. Hey, Peggy, how do you process your beans?
After I harvest them, I like keeping them in my Forerunner. I have plenty of space where I either lay a sheet on the seats or put them in shallow boxes, spread them out all over, and keep the windows rolled up out in the sun until I can get around to sorting them, sorting the leaves and stems out of them, and that allows them to dry very, very well. And of course, broken beetles will come out at that time, and they're short-lived, especially in the heat. They'll a few of them will fly out when you open the doors. once I avoid bringing the pods into the house until I'm ready to sort them out and either put them in the freezer or toast them in the oven, because if I don't, the beetles will emerge from the pods and fill the house. And that's not terrible. I mean, the broken beetles are really not that bad. So it doesn't bother me. They don't bite you and they don't pester you. They just kind of fly to the window. If there's going to be a milling in, let's say, within a month, I don't worry about killing the broken beetles necessarily. I typically put them in the freezer to kill them. I used to put them in the oven to kill them, but it didn't ever seem to completely kill them. So I started putting them in the freezer in something airtight, and I found that a lot of them were killed in 24 hours, but not quite all of them. So I put them in for at least 2 to 3 days. And of course, just like Brad said, you wait after you take them out. I like to put them in an oven even after that, if we're going to mill them, take them to the hammer mill, because I just want to make sure they're completely dry.
What temperature did you use, Peggy, and for how long? What temperature and for how long?
Okay. I usually advise like very low, like 200 for an hour or two, but for me personally, I use about 325 for up to about a half an hour, but I'm right there, batch after batch, and I'm moving things around and putting them on the top rack and then changing them to the bottom rack. But there's a good chance of burning them, because of the high sugar content. So I don't really recommend that to other people.
Done that before in the solar oven. They were in the solar oven too long, and then I had smoked mesquite beans. You remember that, Don?
You can grind it up and make a coffee.
Right? Yeah, it actually smelled kind of coffee-like. Brad, do you have anything to add?
My typical thing is, so I go and harvest my pods from the tree, not the ground, so they're cleaner and all that, and drier. And then once I've picked them, I put them on stainless steel hardware cloth racks, and spread them out on those racks and dry them out. But again, if you don't have that, you could spread them out on the hood of your car or whatnot. I'm just doing that to ensure that everything I did pick is totally dry. So I just leave them out like that for a couple days, and then I do the snap test of bending the pods randomly to make sure they all snap immediately in two. And then once I'm confident they're all dry, I don't have any moist bendy ones in there, I put them in food grade 5-gallon plastic buckets, and I hang them under my Ramada roof. It's a Ramada with a solid roof, so no rain or anything can get on it. And the way I'm hanging them, where I'm hanging them, there's no way rodents can get in there. I've tested that. And then to keep more dust and stuff off, I do put lids on the buckets, but I take a piece of wood chip mulch that's and I open one end of the lid, and I put that one piece of thick mulch chunk in there, so I've got at least a 1-inch opening. And I do that so the broken beetles can escape, because I know they're going to be erupting. I know they're in there. And I also do that because I know the Broken Beetle larvae predating wasps are going to get in. So I get some free pest control that way. So there's still going to be Broken Beetles around, but I found their numbers to be checked. I have far less doing this than if I were just to seal it up and not let anything out, nor let the predators in. These little wasps, they're really small. They kind of look like small ants, but pretty handy.
Hey, Brad.
And sorry, let me just add one thing, Greg. Sorry.
No, perfect. Go ahead.
So, when I do this strategy, I'm doing it for a milling that's going to happen before the rain. So I'm not storing stuff long term. You know, it's typically stored 2 weeks at most before I mill. So if I were going to do a longer term storing, like say
that's the question
now, and I'm not going to mill until October, I might try the strategy I just mentioned, and I might do some freezing too, just to compare. The freezing stuff will probably be fresher.
Right.
So, yeah.
Here's what I've had luck with in the past, and I actually have used my dehydrator. It dries everything out. It doesn't, however, kill the beetles. So often I will pick my beans, I sort them. So always remember, you only want to pick your beans off of the tree or put a tarp down and knock them onto the tarp so that they're not hitting the ground. And then my next step is to sort them. And I sort the beans bean by bean, usually while I'm watching TV. I have 2 buckets. I have my bean bucket and everything else. The only everything else that you should have if you're harvesting it off of the tree are a few sticks and leaves. And then what I've done in the past is then it goes into the dehydrator for 15 hours at like 160 degrees. That makes sure that they're all crisp. And this year, since I'm going to be storing them, I'm going to try the freeze thing. So I'll do all of that. Then I'll put them all in a bucket, a 5-gallon bucket, put the lid on the bucket and stick it in the freezer for 48 hours. And, with any luck, knock on wood, with any luck, that fixes the beetle issue. Vera asks, and this is for anybody, Vera asks, do all pods have beetles? Don?
Yes.
Guess it's that easy, huh?
Because the beetles lay their eggs as the flower is developing, and that's why it gets into the pod. And so the larvae are then part of the pod as it grows, and extends out. And the larvae migrate inside the pod itself, the bean. And so, yes, they all have Broken Beetles.
Yeah. And Catalina says, if the beans are already dry, do we have to further dry them?
Yes, make sure, double it up. 2 thumbs up.
Brad?
Yeah, just play it safe. Because I'm picking pretty quick when I'm harvesting. I'm grabbing whole handfuls of dry pods, but there could be one in that cluster that's not as dry as the others.
Right.
So
yeah, check your green. No green.
Yeah. And I like Peggy's version of using the inside of her car. That works really well too.
And I also want to mention, I don't know if it was said explicitly, but if any of you want to try with ovens, solar ovens work great and they don't have the energy consumption.
Right.
But same as a conventional oven, you do really got to watch them, because I have similarly with a solar oven cooked them when I didn't intend to.
Right.
Right. That's what happened to me a couple of years ago.
That stick again underneath the glass to let that heat out.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
One thing that I do when I sort my pods, it if any of them are bendy, I put them all to one side. If they rattle, then I put them in another pile. So when you're drying them, you don't have to dry, of course, the dry ones as long, but the ones that right up front are bendy and moist, you need to dry those longer.
Mm-hmm.
It really helps. And plus, I want to encourage people to try tasting and eating the bendy ones. I mean, they're really, really special. They're so delicious.
Well, I do want to throw in here. We came to the hashtag at the harvesting meeting last Saturday. Don and I said it's all about the taste. People ask us all the time,
Yeah.
Which one should I harvest from? It's like,
yeah,
it's go ahead, Don.
Taste a tree.
Taste the tree. That's right. It's likely that the non-natives are gonna not be edible. Yeah, exactly. But definitely taste. It's all about the taste.
And the important thing is, even if it's sweet, if it has this aftertaste or this feeling in your mouth like the moisture is being sucked out of your mouth, then don't harvest from that tree, even if it has some sweetness.
Yeah.
And I've also found that there are some trees that don't have that bad after effect in your mouth, but they might not be sweet. You can still use that flour for a recipe that you don't need sweetness. So it's really, even more than anything, as long as it tastes okay and it doesn't suck moisture out of your mouth.
Yeah. Makes your mouth go like this. You don't want to eat it.
Yeah, like
yeah, exactly. Here's what we kind of got to last Saturday. We only pick really great tasting beans. There are plenty of trees out there. Find a tree or two in your neighborhood that has really great tasting beans and only harvest those. You don't need the rest of them. Were you going to say something, Don?
No.
I was going to add something.
Just agreeing with you.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Brad.
Yeah, I was just going to add that I've been finding very distinct flavors of different trees.
Yep.
And so I only harvest from the ones I like, but there's a very wide spectrum in those. And I will actually harvest from different groupings of trees and mill them separately so that I have different flavored flowers.
Yes.
Nice.
Or if I'm not even milling, but I'm just going to be cooking down the pods for drinks or syrup or whatnot, same thing, I can get different flavors. So I'll go for sweet and sour, real sweet. I'll go for nutty. I'll go for the fruity, kind of cinnamon flavor. Some are more nutty. Some are real bland, but still good. There's no negatives. So that's potential niche for folks if they want to have real artisanal, unique flowers or drinks that they make. If they harvest and then mill or process in batches according to flavor. And
that's cool.
And I map these trees.
Nice.
Make note so I can go back to them year after year.
Nice. Catalina says, I'm just going to answer this one real quick. Should the pods with the pinprick holes be thrown out during sorting? Absolutely not. The bugs just came out. They're still, as long as they taste good, you're good to go. Susan says, my pods already fell. When does she need to start harvesting them? I'll throw this to you, Dawn. When does she need to start harvesting them so that they don't fall off and she gets the beans?
It's just a matter of finding that tree that you like, and then just keep going back to check. If there's that window of not ready, fell off the tree. You got to get that sweet spot in the middle right there, so that you got dry, ripe, ready to pick pods off the tree. You can start by telling that there's going to be a scattering of pods under the tree. They're starting to drop.
Mm-hmm.
So there's your indicator. And before they all drop, you want to get either some sheets or some tops or something underneath, and then shake the tree and get the rest of the good ones off. That way you know they're ready because they fell off.
Yeah.
If they hang on to the tree, they're not ready. It's just as simple as tomatoes. You
And
know, it's not ready, it's not ready, it's too far.
And you want to make sure that they're dry
Yes.
before you harvest them.
Yes.
Okay.
I just wanted to add one thing.
Please, Brad.
That, where I think there might be some missing body of experience amongst us.
Uh-huh.
So I was up on the Havasupai lands and was talking with an individual there about the mesquite harvest. And he was telling me that his favorite is pods in the green stage. And so unfortunately, he had to run. I didn't get a chance to get more information. But there may be a whole nother means of processing that can extend the harvestable time. And
Peggy, you can speak to that, I'll bet.
I've tried cooking the green ones, but I'd like to try it again. I didn't care for it at the time, but I like the pods sometimes when they're starting to turn ripe, but they still have some green if they're moist. They have that sourness to it. It's actually not bad. It's kind of a nice treat.
Cool. Let's talk about, I'm just scanning the questions here. Vera says, if my beans are in food grade buckets, should I temporarily freeze them? I would. That's where I'm going this year, given that we're not milling them right away. So temporary freeze them for a couple of days. Yeah. Susan.
Well, in a bucket, I would probably go 3 days just because you've got to get through the plastic and it's not a Ziploc bag. 2 days in a Ziploc, 3 days in a bucket.
Yeah. Well, and we're still, obviously we're still experimenting with this. I have a super deep freeze that goes below 0. So that should get them all. Susan says, where was it? Susan says, so we can't use the ones off of the ground. That is correct. And Brad, can you tell us why that's the case?
Well, there's something that we're trying to avoid, which is aflatoxin. So that toxin is the result of a soil-borne fungus, which we can't see, that can get on the pods. And this is a very common thing amongst many grain crops, corn, wheat, and so on. And it occurs in potentially unhealthy or dangerous levels when 3 conditions occur. So those 3 things are ripe crop. I'm not talking about green pods or anything. This would be the ripe dry pods. Moisture, so rain or someone's sprinkler irrigation system hitting the pods, okay, on the right pods, and then heat, so real high temperatures. So when you have all 3 conditions at the same time, that's when the potential for aflatoxin is elevated. So if you pick up off the ground, there's much greater chance that those pods have uptaken moisture, even if at the time you pick they haven't, but at night they likely are, or if there's an irrigation system, so on. In addition, there's other stuff on the ground that there could be herbicides if people are applying that in the area. It could be fecal matter from wildlife or pets or whatnot.
And this is speaking to a lot of your questions, Matthew. He said, besides the taste, what's wrong with the ones that fall on the ground? So that's what we're addressing here.
Yeah, we're just trying to get a higher quality product. And especially when there's public millings and you're bringing your pods to a mill that everyone's pods are going through, you don't want to contaminate other folks' harvest.
Right. And Matthew says, is there anything else to look for? Some of my pods have blackish spots.
Stay away from, well, okay. There are black spots that's just like, yeah, I want to stay away from that because that pod has gotten moist and dried out when there's some visible molds on it. But without seeing his pods, I can't say for sure. There's some, once you've been doing this for a while, you'll identify some spots that don't have anything to do with moisture or whatnot. It's just maybe the pod got damaged by a bird or something. So you just play it safe.
But when we see that at the milling, we're going to pull those.
Yeah, play it safe, and you see the dark spots, you take that out.
Right.
Over time, you'll be able to learn the subtleties. But for now, just take them all out. Not all the pods, just the pods of the spots.
Right. So people can still throw questions in there. I'm getting most of them out to you. But let's talk about alternatives to milling. And I'm going to start with you, Brad, only because you and I had a conversation the other day about something called a dolphin domestic flour mill.
No, not a dolphin, a giraffe.
Oh, a giraffe. Because I looked up dolphin domestic flour mill. It's $18,500.
Yeah, and it's just for bananas. No, I'm kidding about that part.
Oh.
So so there's Giraffe Mills. I haven't tried it yet. I've just seen.
I have.
Oh, great. There we go. You should speak to that.
Go for it then, Peggy. Talk to us about that.
I just used, actually, Kelly Athena has one. So that's what she uses, and I was at her house one time, and it just grinds it up, and she has a shaker as well, and
a shaker for sorting out the and is this here it is on Amazon, Giraffe X500. Let's see what it looks like here.
Well, there's a lot of different models, so
okay.
That company has more than one.
What is the big problem though, and I'll let whoever wants to jump in on this, the big problem with the beans and how it affects the mill?
Well, you mean the home scale mill?
Yeah, the home scale mill.
Okay. Well, it can go a number of directions with that. So I started trying to do it in just a little hand cranked Corona mill back in the day, and it would always gum up. So the problem with that particular mill is it's a compression mill. So you've got two metal plates or two stone plates that compress and grind against one another. Oh. So it's a compression. So it's far more likely to gum up than something that expels or is flinging the material outward rather than compressing it inward. And so a blender or these draft mills, they expel outward. It's the blade that's moving very quickly. The hammer mill is the same thing. So I've had far greater success with expeller mills than any compression mill. And then the seed is quite hard, so it can be tough on your blade. But I and others in a coffee mill coffee grinder that I only use for mesquite pods. That's a great way to just do small batches. But this draft mill is better because you've got a bigger container, so you can mill more at once. It's much quicker, and they're bigger blades, and it's faster rotation. So I'm curious. I might purchase one just to experiment with that as well.
Yeah, it looks like they're $70.
Yeah, and the thing with those is, unlike the hammer mill at the public millings, which has a screen and is going to screen everything for you, you have the additional step when milling at home of running your everything you've milled through a screen, so you separate the chaff from the flour.
Dawn, Peggy?
I've also used the Magic Bullet. That works pretty well. It doesn't hold a lot, too much more, maybe twice what you can put into a coffee grinder. And some people use blenders or Vitamix. I haven't, but I would think that you still can't grind up but so much at one time because it will get gummed up.
Mm-hmm.
So when I use mine, I like a coffee grinder or a magic bullet. I usually don't let it go any longer than 20 seconds because it will get hot and gummy.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I would think the same thing would be with a blender.
Don?
Yeah, I just wait for the hammer mill. I haven't really tried any of the other things because I don't have a commercial blender, this or that or the other. But you know, you don't have to mill it. You can just keep the pods and cook the pods down and make a syrup, and you can get the benefits from that way, but you don't get the full benefits. Like, you know, by grinding and into flour the whole bean, you get the carbohydrates, the nutrients, and the proteins. It's a complete food. It's the stable food of the native people of this land well before us getting here. It's like potatoes or acorns or whatever kind of staple food. That was what they had here, and they ground it as they needed it, right? They pound it in like a hollow rock hole or a hollow tree trunk hole, and they used an ironwood or some other kind of strong stick, and they pounded it into a paste, and then they transferred that onto the matate, and then they ground that down, but only as they needed it because it stores better whole than it does as flour. So that you know, they used it throughout the year as needed. So I'm kind of that way.
Yeah. Well,
when I can't get to the mill.
Yeah, exactly. There's a couple questions about how long it'll last in the freezer. And what I've found is it'll last indefinitely in the freezer once it's milled. One of the things that happens to it
but
is
it clumps.
That's exactly where I was going. Tell us about that, Don.
Well, I found, you know, it ends up, if it's been in there a while and you've had other things put on top of it in your freezer, as you would, your mesquite flour can end up as a brick.
Uh-huh.
So now you gotta, you know, bring it out and you gotta, you know, ungrind it. You know, you gotta take what you need and put the brick back in the freezer because it's fine, but it's just not in the manner in which you need it for your recipe. You need it as flour for your recipe.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And
I'm again. Hey, there's Brad's hands up. Hey, Brad.
Hey, Brad. Nice to see you, Brad. So go ahead, Brad. I'll come back to mine.
So I just wanted to add, even if you don't freeze your flour, mesquite flour, it can still cake up, bond up. It can become brick-like because, and this is perhaps one reason why the risk of aflatoxin is with mesquite pods. Like many desert foods, it very readily absorbs moisture. So even when I store my flour dry, but in a sealed container, it can cake up. So in the at the grocery store in the kitchen section, you can get these look like tin cans with a little crank on it and a handle, and there's a screen in there.
Yeah,
I don't know what those are called.
Sifter.
Sifter?
Flour sifter.
Yeah, crank sifter. I got one of those.
Makes sense. So I just run as whatever I need at the time through that, and totally fine.
Another way, if it's solid, you can grate it on a fine portion grater. Just it's not hard to grate.
Wow.
Couple of things that I had. First of all, I like to store mine in glass jars. I store lots of different things in 1 gallon glass jars, and that keeps the bugs away. In a freezer, that keeps the moisture out, because if you're in plastic in a freezer, the moisture can still get through the plastic. So that's my preferred way of storing seeds in the freezer, flowers, you know, pretty much everything I can. I like to store in a gallon jar. One of the things that I noticed, one of my favorite places to go harvest is Granada Park here in Phoenix. And Granada Park has a desert area, it has a grassy area, and in between the desert and grassy area, they have mesquite trees. And so this time of year, I wander over to the park multiple times to see when the mesquite beans are going to be available to harvest. And one of the things that I noticed, and this is for you to pay attention to, is that when I was at the park 10 days ago, the sprinklers were on watering the lawn, but they were also spraying into the mesquite trees. And that, my thought, Brad, was that went directly to, aflatoxin problem right there.
Yeah, I would be worried about that there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So something to pay attention to. One of the things that, anything else on harvesting or milling or anything like that, you guys?
Well, Brad did, sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna, since you just mentioned the aflatoxin just there, Greg, I was just gonna say, at the U of A, you can, if you have any concern, you can test. So there's a lab at the University of Arizona that will test your flower for aflatoxin. You can go to the About Millings page of the Desert Harvester's website and click down to the options. You'll find that, including where you can buy little home kit tests, kind of like pregnancy tests, but for aflatoxin. And unlike the lab test at the university, which will tell you the exact level of aflatoxin, these kits just tell you, is it above or below the safe limit?
Still valuable.
Yeah. Cool. Peggy, you were going to say.
Yes, I know Kelly tested, she did that, and she never found anything that had a high enough level of aflatoxin, and she tested a lot of pods. So she could probably elaborate on that better than I could. I just wanted to really emphasize, Brad mentioned that if it rains on mature, or if mature pods get wet. So let's say you have green pods and it rains, it's okay. But as they mature, when they start to mature, or I would say when they're getting pretty close to maturity, if it rains, then that's when the aflatoxin starts to increase. But I wanted to ask Brad, in the higher elevations where the nighttime temperatures are lower or daytime temperatures are lower, can you talk about that?
Yeah, so it was a small data set, but the samples that were studied some time ago by the Mesquite Harvesting Working Group, they tested samples from the low desert and the higher desert around Cascabel, and so they were not getting the aflatoxin, the above safe levels in the high desert area.
Ooh.
So the hypothesis there is that they could harvest without that risk because they didn't have the high temperatures.
So we're talking like Prescott.
No, this is
Cottonwood.
Cascabel. This is 3,500, 4,000 feet.
All right, cool.
So yeah. So again, three issues are moisture, ripe crop, and high temperature. So take any one of those three out, and you're significantly reducing the risk.
Cool.
So in those cooler areas, you're reducing the risk.
On a timing basis, I found that the mesquites in the low desert ripen earlier than those on the higher elevations. But then we have a time issue of harvesting while dry and not the monsoon coming in early, because the higher elevations ripen later and they get closer to the monsoon moisture. And so there's this
Wave?
There's not an exact science, it's an art.
Yeah.
It's why I'm going with this.
Well, this is why we need more studies. We need a greater sample set. So if temperatures are cool enough, I don't know if the moisture contact may then become less of an issue. So, and with our native mesquites, there tend to be 2 to 3 harvests based on the rains. So the first harvest is based on winter rains. The second 2 harvests are based on summer rains, if there's enough rain. So it can become possible, depending on how the rains go, to harvest ripe crop that has not been in contact with water in the late summer, early fall. But again, it depends on the rainfall pattern.
Right.
And it may be in the cooler, higher altitudes again that the moisture contact isn't as much of an issue. So we need to do more studies.
More studies. There you go. All right. So I want to shift this a little bit. And first of all, Brad, I want you to talk about this. This is an absolutely amazing book. You can get it. I'm sure you can get it at Desert Harvesters, right?
Yes.
Brad? You can also get it at growphx.com. So talk about the book, and then I'll talk about our mill and fundraiser.
Yeah.
And then we'll pitch it over to you, Peggy, for some recipes.
So many people throughout the community gave recipes for over 20 native food plant ingredients.
350 pages, by the way.
Yeah, and the recipes were all sampled by many people and rated by how good they were or great they were, and only the really good ones made it into the book. And then, but even still, there was another level of testing. Then the recipe was given to people that had never cooked that recipe before to see if they could replicate it.
Nice.
So only those that were replicable made it in. And you can open up the cookbook to any month of the year and see of the plants featured what is harvestable at that time. But it's not just about harvesting, it's also about let's plant and regenerate to future harvests. So it gives tips on when you plant the seed, when you harvest the seed, do you need to scarify the seed or not so that we can grow more of it for the future. And there's great case studies on many people that are working with a lot of these native foods in traditional ways and new ways and hybridized ways. So the idea is just to spark your creativity and whatnot and invite you in multiple ways on how to engage with all this.
And it's not just mesquite. It's there's
Many
prickly pears. What else you got in here? Chia?
Yeah, also cactus pads, cactus flower buds. We even jump out of the plant realm into the animal realm. So the sweet meat of the desert, pack rat. How do you both harvest, process, and eat that? Grasshoppers too. And it's not just perennial plants, but also annual plants. The greens, the seed, the flowers, this is a desert of bean trees. It's not just the mesquite. There's also the palo verdes and the ironwood. So give you ideas on how to harvest the flowers and seed of them as well. And the interesting thing is, like with the ironwood, you harvest green, you can process and eat them like edamame. You harvest them mature once they've dried out, and you harvest and process them like peanuts. So you're getting distinct flavors and a longer, more extended harvest. So, yeah.
Nice. This is a great book. There it is. So real quickly before we jump over to you, Peggy, actually, I'll wrap up with that. Go ahead. You have a couple of recipes you wanted to share with us.
I can just give them to you. I like simple, or incorporate mesquite into whatever I'm making. So let's just say in general, if I need a sweetener, I'll add mesquite instead, because especially my sweeter mesquite, whether I boil the pods or just add some flour. And so I'll just give you some basic recipes. I have a couple of these on the webinar that I did maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago.
I'm going to stop you there. Hold on one sec. That webinar is at growphx.com. You can actually watch her entire webinar.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So simple recipes. I like 1 cup of nut butter, 1 cup of mesquite flour, and I don't usually add any other sweetener, but if you want to add a little bit of honey, you can. And it makes a nice spread. You can add all kinds of, just about anything that you want. You can add cocoa powder, cinnamon, any herbs. Like if I like making herbal balls, like something good to eat that has something, like even mallow. If you put it all in, I usually put it in like a magic bullet or a food processor, the flour in the food processor. And that, by the way, don't try using a food processor to grind the beans. I think we ought to mention that, or a grain mill, because it will jam it or
could ruin it
up.
Yeah.
So to make these, you can make a spread or balls, and then roll it in extra flour or coconut flakes. And so it's just something simple. Also, I make this gluten-free, or I used to make this gluten-free pancake that was 1 egg, 1 banana, 1 very ripe banana, and just mash it up and just bake that pancake like that. And one day I thought, well, I'll add some mesquite flour to it.
Oh,
so
I'll bet.
you can add that, and maybe a couple tablespoons, but just experiment. That's the main thing.
Yeah.
Experiment with mesquite. Don't be afraid of it.
You can definitely watch her webinar, and you have some of those in your webinar. You can get this book. Let's see here. Just a couple of quick questions. Catalina says, so I pick green mesquite pods? No, you pick them dry off of the tree. That way they're completely ripe. Although, according to Brad, there's maybe some things that we can do with the green pods. We talked about that a little earlier. So I just want to do a shout out. Don and I, a couple of years ago, decided that we needed a mesquite mill, a hammer mill here in Phoenix. And so we went on a hunt, and with Brad's help, thank you, Brad. I called Brad a couple of years ago and I said, hey, where can I find a mill at? And he said, I think, this is what I remember, Brad. He said, Brad told me, I think there's one for sale in Southern Arizona. I said, okay, you got any more information? He said, no, I saw it on Facebook. So I did a little bit of research, and within about 24 hours, I had tracked it down. And it was a very used hammer mill. By the way, hammer mills are about $15,000 new. And we ended up getting this one for $4,000. And by the time we got it up here, it was about $4,500. And then in looking at it, Don and I looked at it, and it's like, this is way too gross to put food through. It was a well-used mill, although $4,000 was a great price. And then we looked at the replacement parts, and we took it all apart and we looked at the replacement parts and found that for about $4,000 we could get galvanized, which has lead solder on it to catch the flour. So the mill is made of 2 distinct pieces. It's the mill itself and then the contraption to catch the flour. And the contraption to catch the flour needed to be replaced. And we decided to go with stainless steel. I told you this, didn't I, Brad? Yeah, we decided to go with stainless steel, which was $2,000 more. So we have an amazing food grade mesquite bean mill here in Phoenix. And Dan, we really wanted to show it to you this week. And we're sorry we can't. And we're still doing some fundraising for it. We still owe about $4,500 on the mill. We did a fundraiser last year on growphx.com, and the link is in the chat box. One of the things is, if you want to support the mill, one of the support levels is this book, and I have 8 of them up on the shelf. So if you want to support the mill that way, you can. You know, with any luck, it's our intent that about the 3rd or 4th week of October, we're going to set it up and mill away. So that's what I have for us. Any last thoughts, Brad? Let's start with Brad.
I'll just, 2 things. So if you all are wanting to grow more of these mesquite for future harvests,
Yes.
I don't recommend you collect any seed for germinating and growing into trees in the urban or suburban setting.
Right.
Because mesquites, they hybridize like crazy. So you don't know what you're going to get. There's a much greater wildlife value when you have native mesquite trees as compared to South American hybrid varieties. So for example, a native mesquite tree, velvet mesquite tree, can support over 60 native pollinators and many migrating birds, whereas the non-native mesquites only support 12 as opposed to 60 native species of pollinators, and their blooming times and whatnot don't correspond as well with the migrating bird life. Like one Wilson's warbler, migrating songbird, can drop into one native mesquite tree, hang out for 2 to 4 days, and increase its body weight by 10 to 20%, just feeding on the abundant insects in that native mesquite tree.
Wow.
But it won't get anywhere near that much life and food in a non-native variety. So go far out into the desert when you're collecting seed to grow. And then also look for, I like a couple things. So pre-monsoon ripening, great flavor, and dense pod clusters.
Yes,
So
they're easier to harvest that way.
Yeah. Now, of course, you still don't know what that particular mesquite tree, who it's crossed with. So it's still a wild card on what you're going to get. So it's the only way to really know what you're going to get is to grow from cuttings and so on, where you're basically using the same genetics.
So do you do air layering, Brad?
Yeah, you can do that. Yeah. But and if you are going to do from seed, at least you're increasing your chances of a good one, because you know at least one of the parents was a good one.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I would just suggest people look into is how can you grow your native foods crops in a way that helps regenerate the health of this place and ecosystem rather than extract from it. So instead of relying upon pumped and extracted municipal water that's perhaps been pumped from deep aquifers or the Colorado River or so on, how can we instead use the free on-site water such as rainwater, storm water and whatnot, and infiltrate more of that to help recharge the aquifer and groundwater and surface waters as opposed to extract from them. And thanks for showing the rainwater harvesting book, Greg. So that's where you get some of that information, harvestingrainwater.com. And then also, one thing I don't think we've talked about is the pods that you don't use for either your cooking, eating purposes. They're great organic matter. There's great amount of nitrogen in them. So you can feed them to livestock. Dogs like to chew on them. But if you don't use it for an edible purpose for you or animals, use it as mulch. It's a great mulch. you're adding more organics to the soil. You're building the soil fertility and ability to absorb water and so on. So there's no waste in a healthy natural environment. So I think it'd be great if we could get away from this rake it up, bag it, and throw it away mentality.
Yep.
And if you don't want pods everywhere, just rake them to where you want them, like rake them off your path and patio and put them into like a sunken water harvesting basin where gravity will hold them in place. And the additional harvested water will speed up their decomposition and return back to the soil and the plant. So yeah, just think that kind of stuff. And one other just little rah-rah thing is I find the more I interact with, the more time I spend harvesting from or planting these native plants, the more time I'm out there, the more time I'm able to observe and learn things I wouldn't otherwise. So for example, when I'm harvesting, I notice the best tasting pods are typically those that are shreddy because native birds have gone and ripped strips off of them. So they're telling me that, like, if I'm in an area I haven't harvested before, like, hey, check this tree out, because
Nice.
the birds are already on it, and they always lead me to the good ones. And Clifford Pablo, a mentor of mine, whose grandfather taught him at the San Javier district of the Autumn Nation, they would harvest on horseback because they're much higher up and they could easily pick the pods. And the horses would lead them oftentimes the best tasting trees because they wanted the sweet pods.
Nice. Observing and paying attention to nature, baby.
Yeah.
So we actually have a grower down in Tucson that's been growing. She goes out and wild harvest seeds from way out there. Bernie over at
Nighthawk Nursery.
Yeah, Nighthawk Nursery. And so we have about 40 1-gallon, 2-foot tall native mesquites here that is also, I think Janice has them available on as part of our fundraiser. So I'm actually engaging her to grow plants for us because we can't find native trees. You know, you go to the nursery, you get one of these dang hybrids. You can't find the natives.
And now's the time to plant as well, right before the monsoon.
Right before the monsoons. All right. Thank you, Brad. Oh, do you have one more thing?
Yeah, I'll just add one other thing. So I love planting the seed of the crops just before or just as the summer rains arrive. And I like to do so within or beside water harvesting earthworks. So you gotta watch where you harvest those seed with the hybridizing plants like the mesquite and also the palo verde. So the palo verde will hybridize very readily, like with palo brea and whatnot. So I learned that when I thought I was growing Foothills palo verde seed, and it grew with more palo brea-like characteristics because I harvested from the neighborhood. So now I harvest those to more distant areas. But there are a number of things you can harvest from seed, like the oregano and whatnot, that's not going to cross with anything and you can grow. But I find that's the cheapest and easiest way to grow is if you grow it with the rains by planting the seed within or beside a water harvesting earthwork and walk away. Okay, you might have to fence the area for predation if you have that. In downtown Tucson, we don't have predation. We don't have the rodent issue, but if you do, you might need to fence that area just so when the plant germinates and emerges, it doesn't get chewed down. But in our area, I'm able to just plant that seed, walk away. I never water it. The rains water it. It germinates when there's enough water and it comes up. And it's got the deepest roots because they've never been hemmed in by a pot. That is my absolute favorite. But sometimes
guerrilla planting and guerrilla harvesting. Yeah.
But we absolutely can plant with nursery stock too.
Yeah.
The plants.
If we can find it.
But then you're gonna have to irrigate after you've planted them. This other way, you don't have to irrigate to get it established. It just set from the beginning.
A lot of people up here in Phoenix want right now trees, right now shade, right now. So
yeah, I get it. I do too many times.
Yeah, exactly. Brad, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Dawn, any last thoughts?
No, I'm done.
All right. Excellent. Peggy, any last thoughts?
Get out there right now and harvest. And it looks like we'll have 10 to 20% chance of rain next week. So now's the time.
This
Last
weekend.
chance.
Yep. Yep. This weekend is it. All right. Well, this has been amazing. So we have been dealing with instant teleseminar and all kinds of challenges with the technology. And so this is the first time that we've done a Zoom webinar. And I really have to hand it to Janice. I have been resisting Zoom and she has been all over it. Thank you, Janice. Are you still out there? Can you unmute yourself and say hi?
I'm here.
Yeah.
Yes.
Janice is an absolute rock star. She makes a lot of this stuff happen, and it wouldn't be happening without her. So thank you, Janice.
Thank you. I would show my face, but I don't have a camera where I'm at right now. So I'm just waving at you virtually, everybody.
All right, cool. All right. Well, normally what we do, there's a ta-da music at the end. So
Ta-da-da-da-da-da.
ta-da, thank you, Farm Out, and we will catch you all on the flip side. Thanks for being here. Harvest a lot of mesquite beans and dry them.